1, Annual Climate Change Statement 2022, resumption of debate.
And I call the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is hard to remember that less than a year ago, advocates for action on climate change, including Labor, had to warn the government of the time about the impacts of global warming. Students, the fire chiefs, business, all had to warn the government on this issue, and they were met with tin ears. That the government of the day, the Liberal National Government, couldn't agree to act seriously on this issue has been a real stain on Australia's history. What a contrast that now we have a government that recognises reality. We know that no Australian is spared from the impacts of climate change. And in areas like mine, the Blue Mountains and the Hawkesbury, we know that we're in the front line of extreme weather events. The Hawkesbury River has always been vulnerable and is now even more vulnerable. The mountainside has always had fires, but we now see them at such extreme levels. We face disasters frequently in my community. There's been 3 natural disasters in the last 3 years. But what we see is that these disasters are becoming increasingly devastating, increasingly frequent, and increasingly unnatural. If the trends continue and no action is taken, the temperatures that we experienced during the 2019-2020 summer will be the norm by 2040. That's what we'll get as an average summer by 2040. By 2060, they'll be considered a good year. Now, that just is totally untenable for my community, because it means that for the 150,000 plus people who live, it really, in the Blue Mountains and the Hawkesbury, it really won't be a place where you can happily live. Our suburbs and villages, our towns and our farms would likely not be habitable. Australia has wasted a decade in taking action, and now it's up to us, Labor, and it's urgent. 8 months ago, we were given a mandate by the Australian people to implement our climate change and energy policy, and since then we've acted. And the Minister's statement on the 1st of December last year, the annual climate change statement to Parliament, was a very strong symbol of how we'll do it differently. What I want to do is summarise some of the things that we have done in that 8 months, but I notice I've only got 7 minutes left, and there's no way I'll be able to get through everything that we've done in putting our climate plan into action. So let's see how we go. So we passed the climate change bill, which was the first real climate change bill in a decade. It tasked the Climate Change Authority to provide advice. It also meant that we put into legislation our targets, and that is 43% reduction in emissions by 2030, as well as having our net zero target by 2050. So that was one of the first things we did. We then got endorsement at the Pacific Island Forum leaders to take forward a bid to co-host the COP29, because we want to be on the world stage working with the world, saying, here's how we've done it. Can we get, let's share these ideas and let's all push each other to do more. Energy ministers put from around the country and the state, and each state and territory put emissions reductions goals into the National Electricity Objective. We have opened up the dialogue with the states on how we do this across the country. We got agreement to the Energy Market Operators Integrated Systems Plan to upgrade our electricity grid. We have had the Priority Gas Market Reforms Package so that we can avoid shortfalls, because we want to do this in a way that supports businesses going forward. We want our businesses to keep thriving, and we want people to transition. We've made sure the Renewable Energy Agency can't invest in things like coal and gas. We shouldn't have had to have done that. That really should have been had absolute bipartisan support, but we had to do that. We're reforming the safeguard mechanism to reduce the emissions from Australia's biggest emitters. And again, it would be terrific to see bipartisan support on that because it's essential to our way forward. We've also done a review so we can, and that's underway, so we can have confidence in our carbon credit system. We passed the electric car tax discount through the House of Representatives to make electric vehicles more affordable. And I saw today that there's been an almost doubling of the number of EVs in Australia in the past 12 months. We have Australia's first real national electric vehicle strategy. That's a 21st century thing that we could have had 20 years ago. We've limited the amount of sulphur in our petrol, saving millions in health-related costs, all part of ensuring that we move towards renewables. We've expanded the nationwide house energy rating scheme to support stronger energy efficiency provisions in the National Construction Code, because this is a place where we can get energy efficiency as well, and that will help our climate. We've announced the first areas for offshore wind development in Australia to continue our path to becoming a renewable energy powerhouse, another opportunity that these changes give us. We've appointed an Australian ambassador for climate change. We've delivered a $67 million package of reforms to modernise energy market regulation with the states and territories. And I do congratulate the states and territories of all colours for working with us on these measures. The Community Batteries for Household Solar Grants program is $224.3 million, and I'm very pleased to see that expressions of interest are open for that. And my community will benefit in the first pilot round with 2 of those community batteries, one in Hobartville in the Hawkesbury and one in the mountains in East Blaxland. Now, these are areas where we know people have invested in solar panels on their roof, but they haven't been able to invest in their own solar battery. So this is a sensible way to allow communities to share in a piece of infrastructure. We'll provide the infrastructure, they can pump their solar into it, pull it out when they need it, and there'll be opportunities for others to involve. Our first 400 community-scale batteries will support up to 100,000 Australian households. There's also the $102 million for community solar banks, and this will assist 25,000 Australians living in apartments, rentals and low-income households across Australia. It is hard for renters to get the same sorts of energy savings, and especially those who want to do their bit to reduce emissions. We've invested $63 million in dispatchable storage technologies such as large-scale battery projects, $62.6 million for an energy efficiency grants program for small and medium-sized businesses to reduce energy use and lower energy bills, and I'd urge people to look into that. There's $83.8 million to develop and deploy First Nations community microgrid projects for remote communities. There's $5 million in successful grant applications for R&D for low emissions feed supplements for grazing animals. And we've joined the Global Methane Pledge. And I think what that shows is that we've had a spread of projects here. We recognise that no one sector is the answer. And while we want to see 82% renewables in the electricity system, and we know that we have to work across all the sectors. We've also significantly signed a partnership to jointly fund the critical Marinus Link transmission project. That's the one between Tassie and the mainland, and recognising the power that Tasmania has in renewable energy. We've signed agreements to jointly fund Victorian offshore wind projects. We've got tight and noxious emission standards for new trucks and buses, again demonstrating it isn't just the energy sector, it is also the transport sector that we are helping and supporting through this process. We've introduced guaranteed minimum stock levels of traditional transport fuels because we know consumers have to be protected from major disruptions, because this transition involves initiatives to take us further, but also things to support business and individuals and help them transition through. We have fundamentally restored...
Order. A division has been called in the
that is
House. The
inconvenient.
proceedings have been suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division.